we go. Okay, so I'm recording this session. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you guys see the screen I'm sharing? For some reason it doesn't. Let's try again. Okay, here it is. Okay, so this is our class example. I'll move it down. Let me just make it a bit smaller so that we can see. Okay, can you guys all see the screen? Okay, so let's go through this class example. So Lola has recently won a tender to build and install kitchen units in one of the new government housing developments. When the contract was secured, Lola invested in the following assets. Okay, so we have information here about equipment and computer software. So as we go through what's important in a test or exam, or even when you're doing your tutorials, is that when you go through a question, it's always good to highlight the information given, the dates, the important information. So Lola purchased new equipment from the United States to assist in the manufacturing of the kitchen units. The acquisition was agreed at $50,000 US. The order for the equipment was placed on the 1st of February 2019. The equipment arrived at the Durban Harbour on 22nd March 2019, but was only delivered to Lola's premises on the 1st of April 2019. Can you guys hear me? I think my mic is working. Someone has said that they can't hear. Okay, so it might be Lisica, it might be your
yes.
volume. Okay, just checking. Okay, so according to the agreement between the supplier and Lolo, the risks and rewards of ownership of the equipment pass to Lolo when the equipment reaches the harbour. Shipping costs of 50,000 and import duties of 20,000 were incurred in transporting the equipment from the US to the Durban Harbour. Transport costs of 10,000 Rand were incurred to deliver the equipment from the harbour to Lolo's premises. So it cost the company 5,000 Rand to install the equipment, which was completed on the 1st of June 2019. Okay, they go on to say the equipment is depreciated on the reducing balance method at 15% per annum. When the company was about to start using the equipment, it realized a special software was required to run the equipment. So the company spent 50,000 on research, trying to establish which software would work better with the equipment, and deciding whether to internally generate the software or buy the software. So let's just highlight that 50,000 for research. So on the 1st of July 2019, the directors of the company decided to buy the software for 200,000. The software was installed into the equipment on the same date and immediately used. So the software has an estimated life of 4 years and there's no residual value. Okay, so from this question you can see that they have not only given us information for the equipment, which is likely going to mean that they'll be asking a PPE type question, they have also given us the information on computer software. So what would computer software be if we had to give it a name? If we classified it in our books, what type of asset is it? Is it like PPE, or what kind of asset is it? Okay, well done. So a lot of you are saying that the computer software is an intangible asset, which is correct. So you can see they've given us information for the equipment and they've given us information for the computer software. So it's likely we're going to get a question on PPE and a question on intangible assets. So they've also told us here, they've given us a whole lot of exchange rates. So obviously they've given us an amount here in US dollars. So we may have to translate it. And if we translate it, we are given the exchange rates over here. Okay. So let's have a look at the first required. Okay. So the first required says calculate the carrying value of the equipment at 30 September 2019. Okay, so how are we going to calculate the carrying amount? Okay, let's go to the start here. It says the acquisition cost was agreed at $50,000. So can we record this asset at $50,000 in our books? Okay. So because we are a company based in South Africa and that is our reporting currency, we need to translate this amount to rands. Okay. So now the question I have, they've given us different exchange rates on different dates. So which date are we going to use to convert the 50,000 US dollars into rands? Okay, so a lot of people are saying 22nd March. Okay, I agree with you. I believe that this US dollar amount should be converted on the 22nd of March. Who can tell me why it should be converted on that date? Okay, why are we converting the 50,000 US dollars into a rand amount on the 22nd? Okay, Maleka has said that is the date risks and rewards were transferred. That is 100% correct. So we need to transfer this amount into rands on the 22nd of March. Okay, so who can tell me what amount they get? If you take the $50,000 and you multiply it by 13 rand, what is the amount we are getting? Okay, so you should see that if we convert the $50,000 into rands, we are going to get 650,000 rands, okay? And that is going to be our initial acquisition cost. Now we need to determine, are there any other amounts that we're going to include in the cost of this asset? So they told us that shipping costs were 50,000 rand. Are we going to include the shipping costs? Okay, yes, I agree. We are going to include the shipping costs in the cost of the equipment. And who can give me a reason why we should include the shipping costs? Sometimes you'll get a discussion question in a test or exam, and they should say, give reasons why this amount should be included or excluded from the cost of the asset. So if I ask you, should the shipping costs be included, and you have said yes, what is the reason for including the shipping costs? Can anyone remember? Okay, there's lots of answers on the chat group. So basically, without the shipping cost, the equipment won't be delivered. So do you agree that the shipping costs are directly attributable to bring the asset to its current condition in order to be used? If we didn't ship the equipment, it means we wouldn't be able to use it. So the shipping cost is a necessary cost incurred in order to bring the equipment into a state where it can be used. Okay. And then if we have a look at our import duties, so let's just go to our calculation. We said, yes, we're going to include our shipping costs. Okay, so we've included our shipping costs. Are we going to include our import duties? So there are import duties of 20,000 Rand. These were incurred in transporting the equipment from the US to the Durban harbor. Are we going to include this in the cost of our assets? Okay, correct. Yes, we are. This is also another example of a directly attributable cost. We are going to include the import duties in the cost of our equipment. Then if we have a look at our transport costs, so transport costs of 10,000 were incurred to deliver the equipment from the harbor to Lola's premises. So are we going to include the transport cost of 10,000 Rand in the cost of the equipment? Okay, correct. We are going to include the transport costs in the cost of the equipment. And again, it is necessary in order to bring the assets in a state where it can be used. Okay. And then the last cost that they told us relating to the equipment is the installation costs. So it cost the company 5,000 Rand to install the equipment, which was completed on the 1st of June 2019. So are we going to include this installation cost? Okay, correct. We obviously have to install the equipment. If the equipment is not installed, it means that it may not be used. So it is a necessary cost that needs to be incurred. So we are going to include it in the cost of our assets. So let's have a look once we include it, what the cost of our asset is going to be. So who can give me, once we add up all of these costs, what the total cost of the asset will be? Okay, you guys are correct. The cost of the asset, once we have taken all of these costs into account, is going to be 735,000 Rand. Now that we have the cost, we need to calculate the depreciation. So it says that the installation of the equipment was completed on the 1st of June. And then it tells us that the reducing balance method is 15% per annum. So when the company was about to start using the equipment, it realized a special software was required to run the equipment. So the company spent some money on research trying to establish which software would work better. So on the 1st of July, they decided to buy the software. The software was installed into the equipment on the same day and immediately used. So what is our depreciation period here? How are we going to calculate our depreciation? Okay, so how many months are we going to include for our depreciation? Are we going to start depreciating the assets from the 1st of June or the 1st of July? So when will we start depreciating the asset? Once it is installed or only once the software has been installed? Okay, there seem to be different answers here. We have to ask ourselves, this software, is it necessary to use the equipment? Okay, so they have told us that we need this equipment, and they have basically they were about to start using the equipment, and then they realized special software was required to run the equipment. So in actual fact, they cannot start using the equipment until it has this special software. So it is necessary for the software to be installed before they can start using it. So the software was only installed on the 1st of July, and the equipment was immediately used from that date. So therefore, our depreciation is only going to start on the 1st of July, not the 1st of June. Okay. If the equipment could run without the software, then yes, we could depreciate it from the 1st of June. But because the equipment cannot be used with the software, it needs to be depreciated only from the 1st of July, because that is the first date where they are able to use it. Okay, so our depreciation is going to be from the 1st of July. So how many months is that going to give us? Okay, it is going to give us 3 months. So we are going to start depreciating the asset on the 1st of July. So July, August, and September is the year end. So we are going to depreciate this asset for 3 months of the year. So who can tell me what the depreciation amount is? So we've calculated our cost. Now we need to depreciate the asset at 15% for 3 months. Who can tell me what the depreciation is? Okay, you guys are very smart. So the depreciation is going to be 27,563 Rand, okay? And remember, we need to include it in brackets because we are subtracting it from the cost of the asset. So now we have the cost and we have the depreciation for the year. Who can tell me what the carrying amount is? Oh, just this date is wrong. Let's fix that. So who can tell me what the carrying amount is? Correct. The carrying amount is 707,437. So the required was to calculate the carrying value of the equipment at 30 September 2019, and that is what we have done. Okay, are you guys all happy with that? Are there any questions on the equipment part before we move on to the intangible assets? Any questions? Okay, doesn't sound like there are any questions. So let's move on to the second part of the required. It says calculate the carrying value of the software as at 30 September. Okay. So why did we not include the research costs? Okay, that is a good question. Okay, what did the company spend Why did they spend the research costs? Okay. The first thing we need to ask ourselves is, are the research costs going to result in future benefits? Okay. Um, so the research costs are actually exploratory in nature, and they're unlikely to give rise to future economic benefits. So the research costs cannot be capitalized. They need to be expensed when incurred, okay? And another thing is, if you look at the research costs, were they spent to research the equipment or to research the software? Okay, so if you look at the research costs were actually incurred to research the software. So they don't really relate to the equipment, because we need to record the equipment and the software separately. We cannot record them together. The software is an intangible asset and the equipment is considered a fixed asset. So we cannot record them together. We need to record them separately, okay? So if you look at the research costs, those research costs actually relate to the software, okay? So we will consider, should we include these research costs when we look at the software? So first of all, they don't relate to the equipment at all, okay? So someone has asked about the depreciation. So just to recap, the depreciation is going to be the cost of the asset, which we calculated to be 735,000. And then the depreciation, let me just unhide the calculation. The depreciation is going to be based on the cost, and they told us that the asset will be depreciated on the 15% reducing balance method, and it will be for 3 months. So because because the equipment can only be used once the software is installed, it can only be depreciated from the 1st of July, okay? So if we count July, August, September, that is 3 months. So the depreciation will be 27,563. Okay, so let's move on now to the next required. It says calculate the carrying value of the software at 30 September 2019. Provide reasons for amounts included in your calculation. So let's go to our calculation here. Okay, so we need to decide now, should these research costs be included in the cost of the software? So we spent the research looking at different softwares. Let's have a look at what it says. It says here the company spent 50,000 on research trying to establish which software would work better with the equipment and deciding whether to internally generate the software or buy the software. So they then decided to buy the software. So should this research cost be included in the cost of our intangible assets? Okay. If you remember back to the lecture, you should have covered research costs. And these research costs actually are exploratory, and we cannot prove that they will give rise to future economic benefits. Okay, so even though the research cost relates to the intangible asset, the research cost, it is unlikely, we cannot prove that it is going to give rise to a future economic benefit. So whichever one we do, it may not change the outcome. So the research costs alone are not going to give rise to future economic benefits. So the 50,000 Rand should be written off as an expense and should not be capitalized to the software. Okay, so even though it relates to the software, when we consider the research costs that are done to decide on the software, we'll see that there's no guarantee that there's going to be future economic benefits. So the research costs cannot be capitalized. They should be written off as an expense and not capitalized to the software. Okay. So if we just go up now and see, so where the information is, it says the directors of the company decided to buy the software for 200,000. So This is an intangible asset that has been purchased and has not been internally generated. So can we record this software? Can we record this intangible asset in our statement of financial position? What do you guys think? So this intangible asset is bought, meaning it has like a fair value. We were willing to pay 200,000 Rand for it. Can we record the intangible asset at 200,000? Okay, you guys are correct. We can record the intangible asset at 200,000, which is what we have done here. Okay, so the software is externally purchased, so we can record it at 200,000 Rand. So if we go back to the question, we'll see that there's no other cost related to the software, okay? So my question is, once we have calculated the cost of the software, it seems only natural that we would amortize the software. So who can tell me what the amortization is going to be for the year ended 30 September 2019? So we have our cost of 200,000. What is the amortization going to be? Okay, correct. The amortization is going to be 12,500. So how did we get that? So remember they told us what the useful life was. They told us in the scenario here that the software has an estimated useful life of 4 years and no residual value. So we are simply going to take the cost of the intangible asset and we're going to divide it by 4 years. But we cannot stop there because the software was only in use for 3 months of the year. So if we had a look at when the software was brought into use, the software was installed into the equipment on the same day and used immediately, okay? So the directors bought the software on the 1st of July, installed it, and used it immediately. So do you agree that we need to amortize the intangible asset from that date? So from the 1st of July, we are going to amortize it till the end of the financial year, which is 30 September. So it's July, August, September. That is 3 months. So out of the depreciation we have calculated for the year, we need to multiply that by 3 months and divide it by 12 months because the intangible asset was only in use for 3 months. So you are correct. The amortization is going to be 12,500. So now that we have the cost of the intangible asset and we have the amortization, remember the required said calculate the carrying value. So we have not finished our calculation. We still need to calculate the carrying value of the intangible asset, and that is going to be 187,500. Okay, so that is the carrying amount of the intangible asset. Do you have any questions on this calculation relating to the software? Okay, everyone is very quiet. Okay, so that is it. This is a short practical this week, but have a look at it. The solution should be placed on Blackboard shortly. It wasn't too difficult, but it does look at the principles you would have learned when PPE was covered and when intangible assets was covered. Okay, if you're confused, I would say go back and have a look at the slides. Maybe you can't remember the lecture on intangible assets because it was before the mid-semester break. So go back and have a look at the slides if you're a bit confused, okay? If you have any questions, you're welcome to email me and I'll do my best to answer. But if that is it, then I will stop recording.